on the first episode of our Tevla Club. Roopali Mittal from Roopali Mittal and Associates, and she's a founding and managing partner of that. So, as you know, okay, we discuss about the industry experts from the domain for this ecosystem. And so we are here today for startup compliance, so discussing with ma'am. So she's a law graduate and she's a company secretary, SCS, fellow company secretary, and also a POSH trainer. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Nilash. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and being your first presenter of your talk show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming, ma'am. Okay, so we are discussing about the today's topic is startup compliance. So what are the startup compliance? Why we should follow that? So we'll discuss it about it. First question is why compliance? Why as a startup? Why I need to follow compliance? Why should I do that?
Okay, so Nilash, before why compliance, I want to say what is a compliance.
Yes.
Right, that is important to know. So compliance is to follow the practices, to establish the practices, or to follow the rules and regulations that has been provided by the law. So that is the compliance. Now the question is why compliances. See, compliances are the integral part of a system, right? Because that shows the personality, I would say, of a company. Yes. That what company is all about, be it a startup or any other company. So the compliances are very, very important to follow, for the reason that if the company is not complying up, right, so in that case the company can end up paying a lot of penalties. There is a lot of financial impact on the company with respect to penalties, or with respect to the the penalties, or probably I would say the fines being imposed on the companies, right? So it shows how the company is disciplined, because the government has put in certain rules and regulations on the companies, right, or on the startups or any other organization. So they have to follow that. That is very important, mandatory, because there are a lot of penalties attached to it. So I would say there are two types of compliances. One is external and internal. We can classify them accordingly.
Oh, all right.
So external compliances are the compliances wherein the regulator has put in the compliances. There is a regulatory body to look after those compliances. So like for external compliances, we talk about income tax compliance, GST compliance, or indirect tax, GST indirect tax compliance, EXIM compliances, Ministry of Corporate Affairs compliances, the compliances under POSH. So, or maybe I would say labor law compliances. The other compliances are applicable to the company. So these are some of the external compliances, and the internal compliances are the bylaws or the standards which the company has maintained for its progress, for its working. So those are the internal compliances. So it is very important for a company to follow the compliances.
All right. So we got a brief about how important it is to follow the compliance. So first thing first, what are the compliance? Let's say if I am a startup, I have an idea and I want to do a business. So first thing first, what should I do? And step by step, what should the process I should follow in terms of compliance?
Very good. Very importantly, you said we got an idea. Yes, the compliances start itself when a person conceives an idea for having a startup. Because if a person, I'll take a study like A is a person who wants to open a startup. He wants to have his own startup. Now, so the person thinks that I want to incorporate a company. The first thing is they have to incorporate an entity.
Yeah.
For a startup, a proprietorship or partnership cannot work. The person has to incorporate an entity, and it is suggestible for these startups to incorporate a private limited company, because then you have a benefit of multiple type of capital structuring. Okay, so the foremost is you have to incorporate a company. Once the company gets incorporated, you have to take its GST number if it is required. The PAN number is already there with the company incorporation. The TAN number is already there with the company incorporation. Thereafter, now you got a company incorporated. Are you a startup? Many of the people, founders, have no idea that by incorporating a company itself, they don't become a startup. Startup in the sense under being eligible to get the startup benefits. For that, they have to get them registered under Startup India. They have to get a DPIIT registration.
Mhm.
So then they have to get that. If MSME is there, so they have to take the MSME registration, right? Then shop and establishment registration if required, or any other registrations which are applicable, like food industry. In case of food industry, facile registration is important. The fire NOC is important. So all these registrations are important for a startup to take. So this is now after conceiving an idea, you have incorporated a startup. You have incorporated these documents. Now the founders of, a big mistake founders does is they incorporate a company, they get the share certificates, but they didn't get the information that they have to get their share certificate stamped, because of which after the stage they have to go through a penalty for that. So they have to get this the share certificate stamped. Then they should have their founders agreement, wherein they should define what founders, like, if they have co-founders, so what the co-founder has to do, what is his responsibility, roles, how their capital structure should be. That is important.
Yes.
Right now I talk about the other compliances. This is what is needed for incorporating or for setting up a business. Now the startup has to see if they have number of employees, more than 10 employees. They have to form a posh committee. Then if they have employees exceeding the limit for PF and ESI, they have to register themselves under labor laws, right? Apart from it, now everything is set, the company is doing, it's working fine. Now what they have to see, now they have to see their if they have a GST number, their GST is being paid on time. Otherwise there is a penalty on GST, which is 18% per annum. Thereafter their GST returns are getting filed on time. Then they are deducting proper TDS. Their TDS returns are getting filed.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have to make a compliance chart list. Then their income tax, their audits are getting proper. Their income tax returns are filing properly. Then with respect to Ministry of Corporate Affairs, there is a form called DPT3 with respect to the deposits or non-deposits in the company. They have to file that return. They have to file MSME return with the ROC. They have to file their financials and annual return with the ROC. So all these comply, and then they have to file also PFESI return if it is applicable. So
Mm-hmm.
all these are the regular compliances which they have to follow. Right. Apart from it, there are the compliances which are event based. Like if they are adding a founder, then the form is to be filed. If they are getting the money, they are getting the investment, then how to take the investment, that is also important. So because a lot of times we have seen that founder takes the money without anything, and after receiving the money they said we want to allot the amount, allot the shares. So it is a big non-compliance. So you need to follow the procedure. First you have to make an offer. First you have to actually draft an offer. You have to file the offer with ministry. Then you have to give the offer, and then you have to receive the amount within the prescribed time, and then you have to make the allotment. Then the FCGPR filings in case you are getting the amount from outside of India. So these are the compliances I would broadly tell you. Apart from it, there are a lot of other compliances which the startup has to follow.
All right, ma'am. So I think it's a lot of compliance. So of course we need a professional, an expert for doing that. So first of all, I got.
So Nilash, it's a lot of compliances, but I would say for founder is he's known about these compliances, and these are not many for them. If they are doing it on timely basis, then these are not many compliances.
Oh. So that's your expertise is needed. So I think there are a number of compliance, but we should start with what I noted. As a private limited company, I had found in that many people started a sole proprietorship or LLP something, and this is the biggest mistake they do because they had to incorporate as a private limited, and rest of the compliance they should follow it. Okay, so there is a question: what is the significance for the startups who are looking for funding of compliance? I think this is already covered in this. If I'm looking for funding, so what is the significance of compliance for me? But if you can, in perspective of as a venture capitalist or let's say on an angel investor, so how it is if I'm investing in a startup, so what compliance I should look for?
See, I'll tell you for both the company as well as the investor. So I've talked about the compliances which the company has to follow, but then if an investor is coming, they have to show them the compliances because there'll be a due diligence, right? So they have to actually, whatever the compliances they have done, they have actually framed that. It's important for them to have all the agreements they have entered. That has to be ready. So with the investor point of view, if I'll say, the investor has to check, they have to do the due diligence on the company. The due diligence has to be a legal due diligence, a financial due diligence, and a secretarial due diligence, right? So with the legal due diligence, they should check that what all the agreements are there with the company, whether all the agreements are there intact or not. Then they have to also check the IPRs, the trademark, the copyrights, if any, in whose name the copyrights and trademarks are. Because at times the founders are not aware of, and they don't have that IPR in the name of the company, rather they have in their individual name. So in that case, you have to transfer that. So that is important for the investors to check, right? Apart from it, they need to check the secretarial compliances, whether all the compliances are intact, all their what I told earlier also, all the certificates issued, they are properly stamped, duly stamped or not, right? Then they have to see if there is a prior investment. So is there a certain restriction which is being imposed by the investors, by the earlier investors? Then they have to check that. They have to check, it is important to check what is the capital structure of the company, what is the bonus being issued, the bonus shares or something, if they are issued, the proper compliances have been done for that. Or I would say, apart from it, they have to check, these are the regular, I said financial due diligence they have to see. So they have to see whether all their financial returns, the audits are being regularly done or not, have been completed or not, right? So apart from it, when an investor, and all these are done after the term sheet is signed. So first the term sheet is signed with the investor. After signing the term sheet, all these due diligence have been done. And after, in the due diligence, if they found that there are certain things which the company has to get it done, then there are, in the main agreement, the shareholders agreement. So we write that these are the compliances which the company has to do before the investment and post the investment. Right now, this is what I check that they have to see. After that, it is important at the time of making the investment, the investors should check that the company has properly filed the offer with the MCA in case of private or preferential allotment, right? The company has properly documented everything. The company has sent them a proper offer, and the company has also opened a separate bank account if it is required. So all these things, investors, it is important for the investors to check. And after the allotment, the investor should get a duly duly stamped share certificates as the proof of their investments. So it's important for the investors to check the previous agreements, also the SHA signed earlier, if any. Yeah.
All right. So we got an idea. So what an investor should look it about, and what are the compliance a company should look for if they're looking for funding, because these are the things, as you told, which show you how disciplined you are and how much serious about you are in your business and how far you will go. Because having an idea is not a big deal. You will find everybody is having an idea and want to make money out of it. But being on realistic term, it requires something. So that's also one thing.
Opening a startup is easy. Maintaining it for a long term is not easy.
Yeah, that's where your metal get tested.
And this is the first step. If you're compliant, if you're starting your compliances, since inception, it is the first step that will give you a good base to grow.
Yeah, got it. And green flag, a good gesture about the founders and the company. And so one thing is, a quick question came in my mind, as you told, because we found that they got funding and they will say, we'll do a lot some shares, and this is not the way how it's done. So what are the possible ways to raise an investment for a startup, and what are the available options? How can they do that?
Okay. See, so there are different type of, I would say, instruments for raising the funds. That can be equity, that can be CCPS. CCPS is preference shares, that or maybe a convertible debentures. right? So there are different ways, or maybe the other notes, through other notes. So I'll talk about the equity, CCPS and debentures here, because there are other type of notes also. So the company that says the equity, you can issue the equity, but I would suggest investors for the CCPS also, because CCPS has some extra rights. So they have a right to dividend before the equity, and they have a right to receive the amount at the time of winding up. So they have privileged over the equity shares, right? So these are certain type, and what investors has to check if they are getting the CCPS, that whether the company's capital structure is having CCPS or not. If it is not having, then the company has to change its capital structure and introduce the CCPS into its authorized capital.
Okay.
Right. So these are various forms, and how they can do that. So there are various ways which is defined. One is the rights issue. Rights issue, okay, but in rights issue the company can give the shares to the existing shareholders, or the existing shareholders has a right to renounce their shares. Then there is a private placement and a preferential allotment, wherein the company has to draft an offer, right? They have to file the offer, and they have to take the board meeting and shareholders meeting actually for that. And once they get the shareholders approval, they have to give the offer to the investees. Yes, and before that, one thing I want to say, that if the company is going for a private placement, then the company has to open a separate bank account to receive the funds. So they have to demarcate the funds received from these investors from the earlier funds which the company is using, because these funds cannot be used until and unless allotments are made. Right? So it's important for them to have a separate bank account. Then after shareholders approval, they will issue the offer letter to the investees. Once they get the offer letter, then the investees has to deposit the amount, and once the amount is deposited, then the allotment is made. A form is filed with ROC, Registrar of Companies, and after that the share certificates are issued. And after the issuance of share certificates, they have to get stamped also.
Stamping is very important, what I learned.
Yeah.
All right. So the thing is that what are the cost of compliance? Let's say, and a person cannot do that. So we'll say if somebody needs and want to follow a genuine path, and which should be, and what are the cost of compliance? And if let's say if I am a startup, I'm not following, what are the penalties associated with me? So yeah.
Okay. So as when I was telling you the compliances, as you said, there are so many compliances, right? So there are compliances, but if you're doing it on time, as I said earlier also, then it doesn't cost you much. Because if I talk about you have to just hire a professional, and there are a lot of professionals who work, with the startups at not a very high rate, because every startup cannot afford that. But yes, if you're having a good consultant, this will be an investment for the startup, I would say, right? So if you're doing the compliances, and it will not, if I'll talk about the government fees are not there. It is just with the ROC filings, which is between 300 to 600 rupees per form, right? And in case you're not doing it, right, in case you're not doing it on time, then there are stringent penalties, right? I myself had paid more than 5 lakh rupees for a startup for not filing their annual returns on time. So the penalties, I would say, so it's not that I'm just making that no, we are afraid of it. No, it's nothing to be afraid of. It is just that you need to be aware of it, right? So if I'll say, if you're not doing it online, then ROC has a very strict penalties for not filing of returns. First, you have to pay 100 rupees per day for the delay. Thereafter, if you're not having your AGM on time, then then there's a penalty of 1 lakh rupees up to, and then 5,000 rupees per day fine on the company and the directors, so which is a huge quantum. Then if they are not filing the annual returns, then also there's a penalty of 1 lakh rupees, and 10,000 rupees and 100 rupees per day penalty on the officer in default and the company, right? Apart from it, if there's certain form MGT 14 which is required to be filed at the time of making the offer, if you have not filed that, Then after 300 days, you have to go for its condonation of delay. Then ministry can impose penalty on you. Apart from it, if you're not filing your financial returns, income tax returns on time, then there is a penalty, which may go up to 1.5 lakhs depending upon what type of return you have to file. Then there's a penalty on late filing of GST, late filing of TDS, which is again on GST it's 18% per annum. On TDS it is 1.5% per month. So there's a huge penalty. Then it will cost a much. But in case if you're doing a regular compliances, then the penalties are not high. If you're not following labor laws, then definitely you have to pay penalties for non following the compliances of it. Yeah.
So I think we discussed about the major portion and why we should and what's the cost of compliance. Is there anything you want to add? We missed about what is important. If I missed anything for the audience and for the persons who.
Yeah, for the audience, I would like to share some examples which we have worked on. We have faced in our working with the startups, and some examples which we have seen what startups are doing. So it is very important for you to take care of your both internal and external compliances.
Okay.
Right? It's not only for startups. In fact, it is for all types of companies. Because we have seen that even the bankers are getting a penalty up to $2 billion for just because there is an unauthorized use of WhatsApp by their employees.
Go.
So so they have the internal policy, and there was a non-compliance of that internal policy, because of it they end up paying that. Apart from it, what we have seen in recent times, there is an edtech company. We have seen through various Bloomberg, there was a news in the Bloomberg that there's an edtech company, so they got a notice from a department for delaying filing their financial returns.
Yeah, that's so a very big term.
Yeah. So if you're delaying it, that the government is there, they will send you the notices, and once you receive a notice, and if there is if there is not a reason for that, then you have to pay the penalties for that. Right. Then we also have seen the examples wherein the co-founders has to resign.
Yeah.
Why they have to resign? Because probably in the earlier stage they have not maintained the records properly.
Yeah. So we are going with time restrictions.
Right. So it's very.
So that's a very good discussion with you. So the point is, I would be sharing the contact details of Mrs. Roopali Mittal. If you want to reach out, if you want to having a direct query, she's very helpful and she's very approachable. Definitely she'll answer your query. I'll share the contact details. You can reach her out. And if there is anything, you can ask her directly regarding to compliance. And that's a nice session with you, ma'am. And you are going for Dubai for GITEX Summit, na? That's in Startup Investment Summit.
Yeah, I'm going for GITEX, yeah.
Yeah, so you can directly contact them. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.